Welcome to the Gentleman Project podcast.
I'm Cory Moore.
And I'm Kirk Chugg. In the studio today, we have Jeff Flamm. Jeff has been a friend of mine for a long time. He's done so many things. I think his bio is about as long as my arm. So I'm going to let him kind of talk a little bit about the things that he wants to. But one of the reasons that Jeff has been so successful and has such a good reputation in our circles is he's been a very successful parent with his wife, Nancy. They have raised an amazing family. I'm going to let him talk about them. Jeff is currently the CEO and founder of Infinite Mind, an education software company that helps people love to read. And I'm going to let him talk about that. Jeff is a real estate developer. He's built lots of buildings, lots of commercial real estate, hotels, and also a prolific member of the service community. Jeff and I got to know each other networking, and then we actually spent some time in prison together. We go and serve with a group at Pelican Bay State Prison in Northern California, and our relationship has grown much deeper through those experiences of serving those incarcerated individuals in prison, and just some amazing life experiences that we've had together. And I don't know that there's many people in my life that I respect more than Jeff from a personal standpoint and a business standpoint. Jeff Flamm, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, Kirk and Cory. It's great to be here with you guys.
So tell us a little bit about, your family makeup, just to kind of give people context.
Well, Nancy and I got married in 1977, and a year later had our first son. And then we had another child about every 2 years after that. So within the first 12 years of marriage, we had 6 kids, and the first 5 were boys. So we had a basketball team.
Nice. Tell us about those boys.
When boys are young, you just don't know what they're going to turn out like, because each one of them is a little different, and each one of them kind of surprises you. And some of them you wonder if they ever are going to make it in life. And so it's really fun to look back and see that they're all successful, because you don't know that when you're a parent that they're going to turn out okay.
Yeah.
You're really grateful when they do.
I mean, as you brag about your kids, brag on them for a minute.
Well, all 5 sons served missions for their church. They all went on and got their master's degrees, and they've all been C-level executives. A couple of them have started their own companies. Now the third one has started his. So they all do very well in business, but the thing I'm most proud about is watching them as dads. They spend so much time doing things with their kids. And as I look back, my dad was busy serving in as city council, in the church, and a lot of things. And I didn't see my dad that much, except when we were working on the ranch on weekends together. But all of my kids, and our last one's a girl, she's the same. They're always doing fun things with their kids, and it's great.
So tell us where that came from. Talk to us about what are some things you did that you could pass on to the listeners, right? What are some things that you feel like worked, or some things that didn't work actually, that allowed for your kids to get where they're at today, for you to be the proud father that you are?
I think the most fundamental thing that made the kids successful is they learned how to work from the time they're young. And I see Kirk's posts on social media where he's out working on this ranch they bought, this small farm, having the kids help build trails and build buildings. And that's what it's all about. With our kids, we have a 3rd generation, it's actually 4th and 5th generation now, but a ranch in Wyoming. And so on weekends, we would go up there and work and dig fence posts. And I know when I was young, that's what I did. I worked at the ranch all the time. And my dad used to say, once you've dug 1,000 post holes, you get your PhD degree, post hole digger degree. So I had it by the time I had graduated from high school. I dug 1,000 fence posts. I think teaching kids to work is fundamental. And we have too many parents now that are busy at work, busy with their own activities, busy at the gym, busy social media, and their kids are sitting in the basement playing games all day and just not even getting out and playing like normal kids would have. So I think getting out and doing things with kids, whether it's work or having fun together, is really key on a regular basis. Something that was really good that came to me, it was back in about 1995, I went on a horseback fishing trip with a group. And we went through the Wind Rivers, we packed in poles, and it was a 5-day trip. Well, I probably have a touch of ADHD, I'm sure, because I can fish for about an hour. And I grew up fishing. I like to fish. But after an hour of just flipping that fly out there on the lake and catching some, I was kind of done. So I went and was reading a book. And it was it was something reorganizing your company for success or something like that, because I had a big growing company at the time. And I was reading this book, and I had this strong feeling that I needed to focus on my family first. And if I did that, the business would work out fine. Because all the principles I was reading about accountability, about teaching, what are the expectations, what is the goal, what's the vision, everyone has to clearly understand that to work as a team. And as I was reading that, I realized I need to do this at home. So I went and got a notepad, and I sat there on the side of the mountain in the sun overlooking this lake. And I filled up this whole yellow pad of what I needed to do with my kids, as far as paying them allowance, teaching them to work, teaching them to be physically fit. Anyway, I had all these things down. And so when I came home, the one thing that jumped out at me, is because I had 6 kids, is that I needed to do some one-on-one with them, that they weren't getting one-on-one time. And so I had this feeling that I'll take each one of them when they turn 10 and when they turn 18 on a trip with just mom or dad, or with both of us. It was up to them. What do they want to do? And so my oldest boy, he was a little older than 10 at the time, but I said to him, we're going to take you on a trip. Where would you like to go? And he said, Hawaii. Okay, we're going to Hawaii. So his mom and I took him to Hawaii. We learned to surf there on Waikiki Beach. And I didn't realize how starving he was for one-on-one attention, but he hardly let go of my hand or my arm the whole trip. And he was so excited. And when he came home, all he talked about is this trip to Hawaii. So the second boy turned 10. Brady took him to Hawaii. And it went, all 5 boys, when they turned 10, wanted to go to Hawaii and learn to surf. So that's what we did. When my daughter turned 10, she wanted a Disney cruise. And I'm like, really? But it turned out really great. I was pleasantly surprised. And then when they were 18, we did the same thing. And they look back at those trips as their most fond memories, is their one-on-one time with dad and mom, where they had our undivided attention for a week. So I highly recommend that to parents. If you've got more than one child, start doing some one-on-ones with them and make it special so they have something to look forward to, because anticipation is half of the fun, is really planning a trip, talking about it, getting them excited about it. The anticipation is as important as the trip itself. So plan it with them and look at pictures and put together a vision board of all the things they want to do on the trip. And it will be a lasting memory for them.
You've told me about this fly fishing trip before. That's not the only thing that came out of this, because I remembered you came up with some other ideas, because it impacted me as a father. You told me about some of the things that you did. You implemented some systems in your family that taught accountability, personal finance, and the things that you and Nancy wanted to teach those kids. And I made my own version of it at home. So I want you to tell the listeners a little bit more about that system that you created at home for your kids.
Yeah, when I was on the mountain that day, all of this came to me. It was just total inspiration. I felt like personal revelation to me of what I needed to do. And one of them was teach kids how to manage money. So I came back home, made up a black binder and a tab for each kid. And then inside, I just made it with a Sharpie. I made these columns and then just made lots of copies of it, put it in the binder. And it had a date and what I earned and where I earned it, how much I earned. And then it said 10% goes to tithing, 50% to savings, and 40% is mine to spend. And so we did a chart every single year under each tab for each kid. And when we were moving last year to a new home, we came across the binder, and you look back and you can see every dollar my kids made, whether it was they got $10 for Christmas from grandma or something from their birthday. So we got that book out, and the kids came to dinner a couple of weeks ago, and we were passing it around, and they were looking, brought back so many memories of all the things they did, because here's a history of every bit of money they made. And they would put it in envelopes and take it to church Sunday and pay their tithing. And then they'd go down to the bank. Nancy would take them once a month when we paid allowance. They'd do the bank trip and everybody would make their deposits. So by the time they were 19 years old, most of them had 3,000 or 4,000 saved. I think our oldest boy had more like 17,000 because he went on a summer sales program before he went and made some extra money. So we taught kids to manage money from the time they're young. And you know what? They all still are very frugal and manage their money, keep track of it. So none of them are extravagant spenders. It's kind of cool. Go watch.
That's cool. And they could be, right?
Oh, they could.
They grew up in a home that they probably learned some of that frugality, right? They also were taught that by their mom and dad, and they've implemented that probably with their own kids.
I asked them, how many of you have a black book? And only half of them did for their kids. They go, oh, we need to get on this. Our kids are growing up and we haven't been doing it. So, but the one thing that was interesting is after I sold my company and we had this big home run, my partner, Ron Gunnell, and I sold a benefits outsourcing company to ADP, to the payroll company. So all of a sudden we had money. And up until that point, we'd just been living very frugal, trying to keep this company afloat and growing it because it was growing so fast. And so we always had this ritual that when the Saturday paper came out, they had all the coupons. So we'd go through on Sunday after church, we'd be sitting there and we'd all clip these coupons and put them in envelopes. These are dairy, this is cold cereal. And we'd only clip the ones we really bought the stuff that we used. And so whenever we'd go to the store, each kid got an envelope. Somebody got to go get the cereal thing. Somebody got to go get dairy and so on. And so one day we're doing that. And I think my oldest boy was 17 at the time. And I had some of the kids with me and we were doing our regular shopping. And I did it every week with the kids. That was my thing with them, is we would do the shopping. And so the kids are running around with these coupons, getting the stuff. They all had their own shopping basket. And we'd merge it at the end. But I had somebody come up and tap me on the shoulder. And I turned and looked. It was one of my employees. And we just sold the company like a year before, and I had to stay for 2 more years and run it. So we were still there at the company. But they tapped me on the shoulder and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Shopping, doing our weekly shopping." "Why are you doing coupons? Don't you know you don't need to do that anymore?" And I said, "Yes, I do, because I've got 6 kids that need to learn how to manage money." So I thought it was interesting that somebody thought you don't need to manage money.
That's a great
anymore.
lesson.
Yeah.
That's a great lesson. Kirk piqued my interest before we came into the room, and he said that you found a way to inspire kids to love learning. Every parent wants to hear about that. So myself included. So talk to us about what Kirk was referring to and give me more context.
We had a couch up in the upper hall. We had a wide hallway in on the second floor of our home where the bedrooms all were. And so we put a couch there, and that became the reading couch. So every night at 9:00, I would sit on the reading couch and read to the kids a story. And sometimes I would just tell stories about our exploring Garner's Cave and up in North Ogden and when I was a kid, or I'd tell them stories about my monkeys when I was a kid. And anyway, they loved to be on the reading couch. Even as they got older, teenagers, they would come and sit on the reading couch at night because it was such a family tradition. And the other thing I did, because I'm kind of a quirky, kind of funny guy, and so I would change the words in the stories to make them kind of humorous. So the kids would read along to see what I was changing, because I would always change stuff, like Little Red Riding Hood was going to Grandma's house to get a roll of toilet paper. I mean, it's really silly stuff, but they loved it. They would always want to follow along to see what Dad changed. So I taught them to learn to read. And I was never a good reader because I had lazy eye as a kid. So when I would read, I'd get a headache, because one side's blurry and one side's in focus. And then I came across this speed reading program in Japan and started doing it. And it fixed that for me to where I became a really fast reader. So then I bought the rights to bring it back into the country so that everyone could learn to read fast. Because the problem we've got today is once kids get a smartphone, they quit reading. Even if they were voracious readers before and they like to read and you'd go to the library, once they get them, 90% of the parents will tell you the kids don't read much anymore once they get a smartphone. So we give them a smartphone and make them dumb, because kids spell they spell well if they're good readers. Reading is so critical to the development of the brain as well. We really pushed our kids on reading and always had how many books they could read, and they got paid so much per book they read. So we incentivized kids on the things we thought would make a difference in their life, and reading was one of them.
So you started IQ, right, is the name of the company. And I have to give, this is not, let's have Jeff on the podcast to give a commercial to IQ. But when my kids were little, Jeff and I we went to a networking thing together. We spent a week together, and I heard him talk about this to all these different people. And I thought, I need to try this for myself. One, because usually I get about 4 or 5 pages into a book, and if I'm not like super fresh, I'm asleep, right? And it's because it was just boring to me. And you told me why it was boring, because I sub-vocalized everything. And I thought, I would love it if my kids grew up with just an absolute love to be a reader. So we introduced IQ to my kids, and I have 4, and the first 3 really got into it. And I incentivized, because of advice from Jeff, I had incentivized that if they would get on and they would do their 6-minute IQ training every day on the computer, that they would get paid a certain amount. It turned those kids into just book fiends. They devour, to this day, they have read more books in the last year than I probably have in my whole life. And I'm not bragging on my kids or anything, but my kids read quickly. They have amazing comprehension. And if they can be in front of a TV or in front of a book, they choose a book. And it's because of this program that Jeff had introduced to me. And we have bookcases and bookcases full of books, and all the books on them have been read multiple times. And I love that, because my kids have become good students as well. And I think that their love of reading has made them more confident in class, and has made the love of education that much more important and easier for them to comprehend. So, props to this program, because I honestly give it credit for my kids' love of reading.
Well, I'll clarify one thing. When people hear the name of the reading program, IQ, they assume it's spelled with an I, but it's actually EYEQ, because it's eye training to teach your eyes to move really fast. And as it teaches you to go fast, you learn to read really fast as well. So anyway, the name of the company is Infinite Mind, and that's where you'd find it. But great thing. We've had it in now over 2 million users and in 1,000 schools. And what we find is the average school will raise their national test scores 24% in just 8 weeks. We don't teach any curriculum. Once we teach kids to read fast, here's what it does. When they go in to take a test like the ACT test, it's a timed exam. And so it's stressful. And once kids start looking up at the clock and realize they're behind, stress sets in. Once that stress sets in, your brain shuts down, because the blood starts going to the fight or flight. And it goes to the extremities and less in the brain. So you can read a question 3 times and not know what it says once you're stressed. So it's shown on tests. Kids usually that are smart students will get 80, 85% on questions, and the first third of the test. And then as it gets further and further, if they're short on time, now they're just guessing or they're stressed. And so their scores go way down. So by getting people to read fast, they're able to get through the test in half of the allotted time. And they have half of the time to go through and read carefully, thoughtfully, each question they weren't sure of. And when they do that, you can, through the process of elimination, you can usually figure out what the right answer is.
Give us some of the stats of like test scores.
We tested it in 11 schools in the Granite School District, including the very worst school in the state of Utah. The kids took what's called the SAGE exam now. It's reading or literacy, science, and math. The kids took that test, and we had them go on IQ for 10 weeks and then take it again. And we raised their scores 25.2%. The whole fifth grade did it. And so we raised their scores that much. Well, that's huge. 25% increase is huge.
I think reading such an important part of becoming your best, actually, just becoming your best. I think about all the ways that I've learned what I've learned, right? Especially if you think about outside of growing up in school, everything that is extremely meaningful to me and has changed who I am really came from 2 places: a book or a mentor, right? I can't even imagine. And I wish I could read it even faster. I'm going to go on there. I'm going to figure out if I can get 25% out of myself. But Kirk's like, yes, you can.
I've done, even after one training, you go back and read the exact same thing, and it will be significantly faster, even after one 6-minute training. It's crazy.
Reading the right books can change your life.
Right.
And you can teach yourself anything.
That's right.
So
That's why
good for you.
I try to get through 100 books a year.
That's
I read
great.
50 and try to listen to one a week on Audible. And what I found is when I read, I retain more because I've seen it. But also when you read, you can go at your own speed and go fast. And the things you're really interested in and focus on, and things that aren't so interesting, you can just kind of breeze through them. So you really find what you're looking for. Whereas when you're listening, you kind of have to stay with the whole thing, even if you put it at a little higher speed. So I find reading's really key to that. The other thing I found is when I had my last company, we would hire consultants and pay them 10 grand, 20 grand to come in and teach something, whether it was workflow improvement or whatever. We'd have them come in or writing a mission statement or creating a company culture. And after I became a fast reader, because I started this at 43 and went from reading 170 words a minute to over 700. So it made a huge difference in my life. Once I found I could read without getting headaches, because I didn't get them anymore. Once I had this eye training, it strengthened my eyes and I didn't get headaches. But what I found is every great mentor out there or authority on anything writes a book. And what do? They put their very best stuff in their books. So you don't need to pay a lot of money for consultants. Just read a good book that's by somebody who's really good in that field and underline the things that are pertinent to you. So when I read a book, I have a pencil with me and I'm underlining, putting notes in the margins as I go. So if I sit on a plane between here and Atlanta in 3 hours, I'll get through a book and people next to me will sit and watch me because I'm turning pages fast and taking notes. And in the front cover, I write what's really important. I'll put P for personal, and then I'll write something that personally can help me personally and put the page number. And then if it's business, I'll put a B, put marketing, page something. So I can look at any book and see in the front cover what was key in that book that jumped out.
That's a great idea.
I like that. Okay, so you might not be able to narrow this down, but here's a guy who's read hundreds and hundreds of books. Are there any that you say, man, these 2 or 3, either meant the most to me or changed me the most, or there's some core books out there that you say, all fathers and mothers ought to listen to, anything like that comes to your mind?
The 2 most important books I would have any kid read, or anybody that's in college wanting to get out and start their own company or whatever. The 2 I recommend is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, because it all starts with where your head is. Mm-hmm. You have to have it in your head first, and you have to be programmed right to succeed. And the second one is How to Win Friends and Influence People. It really comes down to success in life is your relationships, right, whether people realize it or not. That gives you the edge, your relationships. So I have them read those 2 books. And so whenever I'm doing a review of an employee and they're having issues within their department with them, and their counterparts or their boss or whoever score them low on their performance reviews, I'll look, and if it's an issue with human dynamics, I always require them to read that book in the next 3 months and do a report on it for me.
That's a great
of what
idea.
they learned from the book that they're incorporating in their life. And it turns it around. Their reviews in the next year will be much higher.
Interesting.
Just from reading that book.
Interesting that those 2 books are both 70, 80 years old.
And right. Some of my absolute favorite.
And some of Cory's absolute favorite. It was probably a couple of the books that I read that made the most impact on me as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that's important to bring up because, I think as fathers and as gentlemen, getting some of these books into the hands of our kids, right? Like I'm asking my daughter right now, as we speak, to read How to Win Friends and Influence People, because I'm thinking it's just a core. It's become a core part of who I am, right? I think some of these books, getting them to our kids way earlier than I saw them, right? I didn't see those books that you're referring to till I was in my 20s.
Right. Me neither.
And I'm giving to my 10-year-olds, right? Like, please read this. And you're going to reread it again. Trust me, kind of a thing, because Think and Grow Rich isn't going to mean the same thing the first time as it will 20 years later, right? They all kind of change. So I appreciate you sharing that.
I remember my grandpa giving me Richest Man in Babylon and Greatest Salesman in the World and Think and Grow Rich. And he said, if you'll read those 3 books, you'll have a good foundation for money management. You'll have a good foundation for people skills, and you'll be successful. And,
those are some of my favorites.
Yeah. And there are all these old classics, right? That have been around forever.
Timeless.
Do you have any quotes or mantras that the Flamm family lives by?
Yeah, the one we've used ever since they were kids that I've taught them is, in our family, we're winners. And I said, a winner is the person who does the most. So I said, when we're all doing Sunday dishes and somebody slips out because they have to go to the bathroom or they have some other excuse and they disappear, they think they're winning because they got out of a chore. And I always taught my kids, the winners are the ones who do the most. They win in life because they learn to serve, they learn to be the best and give the most. And I said, those to me that skip out on things that think they're winning because they don't follow the rules, they end up becoming a big loser, in my opinion. So he said, Flams are winners. We're the last ones there taking down chairs after a party. We stay to the end and do the right thing. And that's what winners do. So they're always kidding about, well, I'm a winner, Dad. Even now they're adults, they still refer to that a lot.
You've had some pretty tough challenges in your family. I know this because of our personal relationship. Some of the things that you're involved with charity wise. Would you mind sharing some of the experiences that you had, if you're comfortable with that?
Yeah, we had a granddaughter. She passed away it's going on 7 years this year. This summer it'll be 7 years. But when she was 3.5, she had a little brother born. And so Amanda took the little boy Austin in for his doctor's checkup. And he looked at Millie and said, something's wrong with your daughter. She was kind of a gray color. And Amanda said, yeah, she's been laying around lately on the floor and not doing much and saying she hurts. And I thought maybe she was having a growth spurt, that her bones are hurting. Maybe they're growth pains. And he said, just look at her. She's either got brain tumor, some kind of brain cancer or leukemia. So let's hope it's leukemia because it's the most treatable. And he made him go right to the hospital and get tested that day. And when they tested her, she had leukemia.
Wow.
And she was 3.5. And so for the next 4 years, they battled leukemia with Millie. And she spent probably half of the time in a hospital. She went through bone marrow transplants. She went through all kinds of tests that were real experimental, especially towards the end when they could tell they were losing her. But she would totally rebound after, she had bone marrow transplant. Then she showed no signs of cancer, but within a month or two, it would be back with a vengeance. And she became kind of the spokeschild for leukemia, and they had her speak up at the U at big conferences and stuff because she was so positive and happy all the time.
And she was how old?
Up through, she died at 7.5.
She was speaking at the U.
They had her speak up at conferences, and she would talk about her experience going through it. And she said, you just have to be bigger than leukemia. You have to look beyond it and still be happy and do things. So at the hospital, she's the most creative little child you've ever seen. She could make anything out of pipe cleaners. One time I came up and she had made Noah's Ark with all the animals out of styrofoam cups and a glue gun. And she'd made this incredible big ship with all these animals on it. People couldn't believe a child could have made this. But she was just talented beyond belief. And I've often felt like, she was here for a purpose to get a body on this earth and stuff, but she didn't need to stay. She was so perfect in so many ways. And anyway, so we went through a hard time when you lose someone you love so much. And for anyone who's dealt with someone that they've had to care for a lot like that, their life is totally empty. Once that person's gone and you've spent 4 years nonstop taking care of that child, all of a sudden you're kind of in limbo. You don't know what to do. And so Brady and Amanda decided one thing they noticed during their 4-year experience with leukemia is over half of the families who had a child with leukemia got divorced within a year or two of it. Because they get in so much financial pressure, everything's falling apart, and pretty soon their marriage, because they're losing a child, they're broke, everything goes bad. And so they decided to start the Millie Princess Foundation in memory of Millie and do a race every year and other activities to raise money. And they choose 6 or 8 families a year that they'll give them $30,000 to $40,000 each to help pay off bills so that they're not under so much stress. And so they'll have the high schools involved. In a couple of years ago, one of the high schools on the west side, they raised $220,000 in 3 weeks, and the junior high raised another 20. So they raised about $250,000 in 2 or 3 weeks before Christmas for the Millie Princess Foundation. And what they do at this schools is they do an assembly and have 3 kids with leukemia come, and each of them would speak, and their families were on the stand. And then the kids would go out and raise the money. And then they have another assembly at the end, and they'd give checks, these giant checks to these families, and the kids would be there and they'd present them. And you just watch what it does for families. But what Brady and Amanda did the most is when they find out anyone has a child with cancer, is they're there at their home and saying, how can we help? We're here to save your family, not just your child. Because if you lose your family along the way, you've lost a lot more than just losing a child. So they're there trying to help keep the family, give the family the support they need financially and emotionally to make the marriage last. That's their goal.
What an incredible foundation. That's cool.
You may not have a answer to this question, but it kind of makes me wonder, outside of financially, are there some lessons learned in that and how to keep a family together that they found through the foundation?
It's so much just support to be there and help coach you through things. So when you're having a hard time, you're not lashing out. You get them a chance to talk about it. And then they just talk about, they kind of educate them. The families that fall apart, everything gets worse. You've got 2 mortgage payments now, or 2 apartments you're paying for instead of 1. Things don't get better when you get divorced. It just adds more pressure. So let's fix it. What do we need to do to help you? So they just ask a lot of questions and try to help the couples and the families. But it's been remarkable. They have lifelong friends from this. So when they do the Millie Princess run out at daybreak every year in June, they'll have 1,100 people come out and do the run, and all ages, kids and parents. And it's a little 5K, and they have a shorter one for the little kids. But most of the girls come in tutus, little dresses or whatever. And a lot of the guys from the U that come and support because they've known somebody with cancer, you'll have these athletes wearing tutus and running it.
Because Millie always dressed up as a princess, right?
Millie wore a tutu a lot and liked to be princess. So that's why it's the Millie Princess run.
That's precious.
Well, that's a good example of something horrible happening to a family and then making a positive out of it. So props to Brady and Amanda. So Jeff, if you could go back and relive one day as a dad, either because of a wonderful experience or something you wish you would have done different, can you take us back to that day and give us a lesson?
Well, I came home from a business trip, and Nancy was in tears, and it's because one of our boys was just bad, just back talking her and no respect for her. She'd ask him to do something and they'd just argue with her, say no. And so I came home and she was all in tears. Well, if you want to get me mad, have my wife in tears. That gets me mad.
Yeah.
So I go up, and he was such a little snot about it that I was yelling at him. It was the closest I'd ever come to kicking a kid out. And I said, I think you need to leave if you're not going to live by the family rules and respect. And Nancy said, no, don't have him go out. Anyway, because I was really ready to kick him out. She was asking, don't do that. He won't come back. So anyway, I look back and I should have handled that differently. But I think I just got caught up in so much emotion. I was stressed from working all the time and flying so much. It's stressful trying to keep a whole company with 1,400 employees going in the same direction. And then you come home and you're trying to fix kids being little snots. It was a little hard for me because at work, people respected what I said. At home, when your kids don't, you just want to wring their little necks. So I think that was hard. If I had it to do over again, I would take a break and walk away from the situation for a while till I calmed down.
Is that how you've dealt with that? Is that what you learned from it? It's like, don't act
impulsively. I don't think I acted like that ever after that, because I realized I was a jerk as a dad. I didn't handle it right.
So talk to us about how your kids are grown now, and I'm assuming everyone's out of the house, that kind of a thing. So talk to us about how you're connecting with your kids today, now that they're grown. What are you doing to kind of keep the family and the relationships alive, kind of a thing? Well,
we're fortunate that we've got some places to go as a family. We have this family ranch, and so we go up there a lot together. And so all the little cousins, we have 22 grandkids, they're all up there together. And if we're out picking up rocks in the field, the hay meadows in the spring, they're all there gathering rocks with us and throwing them in the front end loader. It's just fun. We do that together as a family. And then we have a ski cabin up at Brighton. And so kids are all there on weekends, and all the grandkids ski together. So they've really formed close relationships with each other. And like yesterday, we went up to Ogden and did iFly and Flow Rider and climbed the rock wall. And there was a cheap deal on Groupon, so I bought it for them all for Christmas. And yesterday we went and did it with them. And it was just a blast to all do it together and all these kids being able to do it together. So I think you just have to create things. You have to make them happen, or you get so busy they just don't happen. You have to make them happen. So you've got to plan some things. Now, Nancy's probably the best grandma I've ever seen, because every Wednesday she does crafternoon with the girls. And they come to our house, all the granddaughters, and she teaches them to crochet or needlepoint or whatever. They're always doing hand things or painting. She's got some project spread over the whole bar and all these kids doing it, whether it's making a gingerbread house or something. And so the boys were feeling bad. And so the dad started doing that once in a while with the boys. So we had a night we made gingerbread boys with all the little grandsons, because some of them were feeling bad. They don't get to go to crafternoon. But we tried to take the boys out and do more hiking and biking with them. But what's interesting is whatever you do with one group, the other group wants to do it too. They don't want to be left out. So when we go biking, the girls want to go too. But we try to do things on a regular basis as a family where everybody's invited. And so it's really kind of cool, because if anybody's doing anything, they all want to be there. And that's the best result you could ever get out of your children, is they like to be together with their kids.
That's great. You got to do it on purpose, right?
You got to plan it, make it happen.
Got to make it be a non-negotiable and prioritize it. That's good advice.
There's one other tip I was just thought of that we did as a family, and I think it would be good for every family to do. When I'm hiring people, we do our first interview over the phone. And so many kids today, I wouldn't hire to work in our phone center or work in our company, because they don't know how to say anything but like.
The
Well,
fillers.
it's like this and like this and like and I like and like. And so we used to do a thing with our kids that they had to go for 3 minutes and tell a story without using any filler words. Like, and, you know, all those kind of things. Because I took Toastmasters. And so I used to require all my top people to take Toastmasters and learn how to speak without using filler words. And today, I mean, it doesn't matter what show you're watching. My wife and her mom sit and watch The Bachelor, and so I join them a lot of the times. And you sit and listen to some of these girls or guys, and they can hardly say anything. Every other word is like. So we had a challenge when we would ride in the car. The kids would get $5 if they could go 3 minutes without telling a story without using any filler words.
It's a fun game.
And if they could go 10 minutes, they'd get $20. So they'd try the whole trip. Okay, it's my turn again. And they would try to tell a story with their last scout trip or some adventure, or tell us about your favorite class in school and what you learned this year, whatever. We'd just give them stuff to talk about and see if they could learn. And so our kids do not use those filler words at all. If you talk to my kids, they don't use them. So I would just give that as a tip to parents, because when kids go out to look for a job, that's one of the things people look at very heavily, is how well do you speak? Can you speak without sounding like you're 17 years old on a skateboard?
Yeah. And it's harder nowadays to find people who don't use, especially that word like. I always ask my kids, well, you mean it wasn't real? It was just like that? Or was it really like, did that really happen? Or was it just like that happened? Just to mess with them with what you're saying. I guess I need to pay him to give me a speech for
Little
2
dad
minutes.
teasing.
That sounds like a better way to go about it. But we have people in our professional careers now that are, especially in a younger generation, many of the times, who are using the filler words like you can't believe. And it's a little mind numbing sometimes.
We hate to put them on the phone with top clients, right? When they speak like that.
Core principles that you've been able to teach your kids. You said hard work, financial management. What are some other things that you think would be really important to raise successful kids?
Well, it's interesting because we have a mastermind group we put together, and we talk about the 6 F's in life, which is family, finance, faith, fun, fulfillment, which is giving back, and fitness. Those are 6 things that are important to have a well-balanced life. And I think one of the most key ones is faith. And the one thing that was really great is I taught my kids, we don't take a vacation from God. So if we go on vacation, we take our church clothes and we go to church wherever we are, because we don't take vacation from God. So we all do that. So if we're at Lake Powell, we get in, leave the houseboat, get in the motorboat, go over to Page and go to church. And I think the kids have all learned that. They know that on Sundays, wherever they go, they'll go to church. And that's a principle you have to teach kids. And today people are getting very lax on religion and faith. And it starts with faith. What's your faith in God? And do you you openly show that to the kids and share that with the kids. And if you don't, they're not going to have it.
So thanks for sharing that with us, Jeff.
We ask all of our guests, Jeff, this question. And it's actually kind of a hard one we've learned over time, right? And that is, what does it mean to you to be a gentleman?
In my opinion, when I see somebody and I think of a gentleman, it's somebody who's kind and respectful to others. And they're genuinely interested. They look you in the eye and they try to figure out what they can do to help you. I think that's a true gentleman. Is how can I help? And being kind. It starts with kindness, attention. And today, in today's world, and I'm guilty of it too, I have my cell phone with me all the time. And we oftentimes spend more time looking at our cell phone than interacting with the people we're around. And I think to be a true gentleman is, and I've got to work on it myself, it's learning to put aside things when you're with somebody and give them your undivided attention.
Great advice. Great advice. Cory and I actually had lunch today, and I had my phone on the table, and I'd realized it at the end of the lunch. And I thought I should have put that in my pocket, like just the attention, like there's nothing more, just out of respect, there's nothing more important than what's happening right now in my life with the people that I'm with.
Right.
And, if my phone rings or I need to look at the clock or something, I can take it out of my pocket if it's absolutely necessary. But there's almost always that looking out of the side of your eye. I'm not all here for you.
And
right
that's
now.
probably the biggest lesson all of us have to learn as a new generation is how to manage our cell phones, really. I think it's parents are as guilty as kids. We all do it.
Oh, yeah.
They learn it from somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Well, think about that 50% in on the faith side or going to church. Are you 50% listening to your kids?
Yeah.
Or are you looking at your phone?
Yeah, because they're
That's
gonna
right.
learn
Right.
parenting from you.
Same thing.
Right. If somebody wants to know more about what we talked about today with Infinite Mind, IQ, where's the best place to send them?
If they go to our website, infinitemind.io, it'll say free demo. Just do the demo. It'll test your reading speed and you'll see where you're at.
Yeah, do it. It's pretty cool. And then if they want to know more about the Millie Princess Foundation,
Just Millie Princess Foundation. Type
okay,
it in
and they
it'll
can
pop
get
up.
involved.
Yeah. Love
Very
to have
cool.
them involved. They look for volunteers that want to help. And hopefully this year they'll be able to do it in June. We're hoping.
That's great. Jeff, thanks for being a gentleman in my life.
Thank you.
You're somebody that I've learned a lot from, and that I'm very grateful that I have you in my circle of friends. And now in
Thanks
Cory's
so much.
circle of friends, I'm excited for you guys to get to know each other as well.
Yeah.
You're a gentleman, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us
Thanks
today.
so much, Jeff.
Thanks for the invitation. Bye, everyone.